Well, hi and welcome to this video lecture. In this video, we are talking about this question which came in the paper 2023 GS paper 1 Indian society part. What does the question say? Let's read this question. Do you think marriage as a sacrament is losing its value in modern India? The question is asking us to argue, provide our arguments in favor of, against, and giving a final conclusion to evaluating whether marriage is being considered a sacrament or not. And for that, we would need to know, first of all, what do we mean by a sacramental nature of marriage? Now, traditionally, classically, Hindu marriage is considered to be sacramental in nature. It means that marriage is a sacred bond and that it cannot be broken with either death of one of the spouses, or even there is no provision for divorce. So in fact, the provision of divorce in Hindu marriage was introduced only by the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955, did not exist before. The idea of the sacrament is that marriage is a sacred bond, there cannot be any break in this bond, right? So today, is that changing? That's the question. So what is happening with modern times? That's the question here. Now, we find, first of all, we can talk about that in the modern times, a lot of things are changing. What kind of things are changing? Broadly, if you talk about the big scenario, macro scenario, there is urbanization that is happening, there is globalization that is happening. Social dynamics are changing, with traditional view of marriage changing to some degree on account of this big macro changes. So which ones more particularly? First, we find that a lot of people increasingly value individualism. So the collective direction of tradition, of society, of norms that has been coming down with people in people's value system, in their ideas, ideologies, that weighs less. Increasingly, it's much more important to people what matters to them, because individualism is the dominant value norm for a lot of people more than before. And so what does marriage mean to them? It's not the sacred idea as much. It's what they think of it. And that means that if they prefer to get out of a bad marriage or not get into a marriage in the first place, well, then their sweet wish, as a lot of people see this. Then we are saying emergence of alternatives. So historically, there were very few options on the table. You had to get married, obviously, right? Because what are you going to do otherwise? I mean, one, the institution of marriage is about the stable satisfaction of sexual function. But today, that can be done within live-in relationships, and people can even have free sexuality outside of a marriage, right? People can otherwise live in alternate types of family structures, such as single-parent families, without a lot of pressure from the society. So other kind of alternatives are available. So the way that people look at it increasingly, they don't see it as a sacred bond marriage, like that traditional structure thing. Now, reduced stigma. As we said, that attitudes are changing. So it's not only what you personally believe, what people around you believe. And if you got a strong community and others really uphold the standards to you, then there's a lot of social pressure. But community is withering, and the stigma is itself withering, because a lot of people's attitudes are changing. Rising aspirations among the youth. We can see one in particular, that there is also the idea of materialism. That what does achievement look like? What is positive desirable change? For a lot of people, that is in material terms, in career progression, in terms of things which they can touch and feel, which are material objects, not ideas or values, or these ideas of how community thinks of them. So since progress is being defined in material terms, obviously priority is to material ideas, and marriage takes in that case a back seat, right? The considerations of this. Now, on the other hand, if you look at the other side of the arguments, still, obviously, we have families which are dominating in the base of a family. How does a family get formed in the first place? That's marriage. I mean, marriage is the starting and building block of family. And most of the people, if not all of us, obviously are from a family, right? Maybe that does not have very strong links, or maybe it does. But whichever way, marriage is the basic bond. And obviously, people still have families. Second, continuity of lineage. People really have this deep down urge to pass down their genes, to pass down their culture, to continue to exist. And the lineage, the inheritance, the passing down is going to happen within this family structure by having children, by having procreation. And thereby they do think that marriage is quite important for them. So the general importance of marriage on account of that is important. Apart from that, people are a lot of people are still dominated by religious ideas. Although that the hold that religion has over the minds of people may have reduced to some degree, but yet still there's a lot of religious ideas and morality that has diffused so much, has become so much a part of society, it's difficult to identify. But yet still religious ideas dominate us. And thereby coming from this religious idea that marriage is a sacrament continues to dominate. Now, to conclude, we can say that, well, marriage is experiencing a dynamic relationship between two things, between tradition and between the forces of modernity. It may not be necessarily losing its value, but we can see it as adapting to the changes, to the diverse needs of modern society. We do have a very large number of diverse needs. The agricultural society is replaced with industrial and post-industrial services sector dominated society, and the work needs are very different, the mobility needs are very different, the migration patterns are very different, and marriage is one of the institutions which has to evolve with the changing times, and so it is, right? So this is a classical discussion that we've done over whether marriage is changing as a sacrament or not. There obviously is, sometimes we can do a legal discussion about this. A legal discussion could be, it goes generally like this, right? And for our GS purpose, this is the best way to go with it. But a legal discussion goes more like, or a religious legal discussion goes more like this, that, the provision of divorce was introduced in 1955, so Hindu marriage is no more a sacrament, right? See, Muslim marriages and other marriages are already considered a contract. They're not considered a sacrament classically, right? So Hindu marriage, because divorce was introduced in 1955, that it is no more a sacrament because there can be a divorce now. However, then there would be others who would counter argue and say, well, that it's not a right of a Hindu couple to get a divorce. In fact, it's a discretion of the court, right? And the court may or may not grant it. And there is no out of court divorces in Hindu marriages. And that way, it's still not a complete, the sacramental nature has not ended because it's still difficult to get out of a marriage. It's like a sacred bond, right? So these kind of arguments and counter arguments can still be made, whether that is increasing or not. Anyway, for now, well, this is our content for our GS perspective answer, right? Thank you. See you later.